This video is a recording of a live event, about an hour and 15-minute webinar. It's really packed with all sorts of energy healings and information and explorations into the fine abstract layers of creation. I hope you love it. If you do, please like and subscribe. Thanks for being with me. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the webinar right now. We're going to do a review of what is energy healing just briefly. Then 3 minutes of silence, and take your time coming out. And then we'll do a prayer of gratitude, and then a review of yesterday's session, just a few highlights, and then diving into today's session. And as I mentioned, a lot of beautiful, really great, powerful questions came in. So I'd like to be sure to address all of those best that I can. Energy healing is the process of using consciousness to affect the physiology, basically. And it was born out of the need because there were problems with the body and people suffering health situations and concerns. And that knowledge that most health conditions have some foundation, some psychosomatic foundation. And that doesn't always mean like terrible accidents, but even that a person would get into an accident in the first place. There's some karma, right, connected to getting into the accident in the first place. So we can trace the seeds of suffering and discomfort back to consciousness pretty much every time. So then it occurred to me, well, then if we can move consciousness, then we can move the physiology. So that's when some work started in that area and found, lo and behold, it does seem to work. And the overall effect, the overarching effect of this process is evolution of consciousness. And evolution of consciousness gives rise to a condition whereby the suffering just doesn't happen as much. We find that going on day to day, that the types of problems that we were facing before and the types of challenges, they fall away. New ones come up, but but the tools to deal with those new challenges also are growing and expanding all the time with energy healing. So it seems to be a beautiful tool to accompany us on our evolutionary journey and also on our journey to optimal health. And as I see it, the goal of health is to embody the source of creation as perfectly as possible. That means being, infinite, eternal being, coming to the foreground as manifest self. And that's what it is. I mean, that's what the body actually is. But when there is some discrepancy between the surface expression and that immutable, silent, infinite, eternal source of all that is, then that's when suffering comes in. So we want to keep working to make the surface more and more and more a perfect reflection. All right, so that's energy healing, sorry. That's energy healing in a nutshell. And as we're exploring how to heal ourselves, we're also exploring how to heal the whole creation and how to better align ourselves with the source of creation. Good stuff. Based on that, awareness, contacting the source of creation, being connected with the source of creation is clearly and obviously a fundamental of energy healing. That's why it's so nice to start these live healing webinars with a few minutes of silence. So we're just going to do that. We'll take about 3 minutes. I'm looking at the clock. We'll take about 3 minutes and close the eyes and just allow awareness to gently, gently settle into the silent source, the space between the gaps between the thoughts, the gaps between the breaths, the gaps between the states of consciousness. And when the 3 minutes is over, I'll ask you to slowly open the eyes and don't be in too much of a rush because we want to allow the nervous system to integrate the silence as much as possible. All right, let's close our eyes. Let's slowly open the eyes. Take a minute. The silence was just so soothing and so healing and comforting. It's like I let it go more than 3 minutes, went 4 minutes. Oh, but it was so lovely. Oops, I'm sorry. All right, we'll do our prayer of gratitude. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being everyone, for the existence of us, of our bodies. Thank you to our ancestors for their contributions to the present life, this present life and this present body. Thank you to all of them. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom who has lit the way with the light of knowledge between the path or the bridge between the relative and the absolute, between that silent source and this whole manifest field. Thank you for our ability to work concisely and efficiently. We like going to the seed or the root cause, the root of suffering, and addressing that in the most profound and effective manner. Thank you for integrating our opportunity to work together and thereby integrate energy healing for all of us in a more complete way so that that energy healing process and technology becomes more and more useful. I hope that our hour and 15 minutes today fulfills the hopes and desires and expectations and wishes of everyone here for what we can accomplish as a collective and as divers into the ocean of consciousness. Thank you, everyone, for the privilege and opportunity to be here and to be the voice and to be in this seat, to sit in this seat. Thank you for giving me your trust. I really appreciate it. And it's always my intention to live up to all of your hopes. It's always my intention. So as I said, oh yeah, so now, okay. So that's the prayer. Thank you, everyone. Shagru Def. You can cut that out if you need to. That's just a knee-jerk reaction. Sorry, I thank the masters. Yeah, I wanted to do a recap of yesterday's session. I want to do a recap of yesterday's session. The most important point that came out of yesterday's session was that nature doesn't throw away anything, but our human reality is full of the concepts and ideas that are associated with disposing of things and dispensing of things. And so all of those ideas like worthless and useless and disposable and stupid even maybe, and lots of different concepts like that. We've got plenty of words to describe that way, that sort of attitude towards ourselves or towards our environment or towards things or other people or whatever. And we can see how that attitude has justified cruel behavior through centuries. My husband and I were reviewing a little bit history this morning, and even the very earliest human remains show signs of cruelty. I think something like 1 in 10 in the early days of agriculture, 1 in 10 human remains show the signs of, having passed on as a byproduct of some kind of violence. So we know that people have been not only kind of exploitative and treating the environment like it's not adorable, but also treating each other that way and treating ourselves that way and so forth. It's a long, long old stress that's been sitting in the human collective. And so this was time. It's been time to turn that around. So most of yesterday's healing was a healing for that. And it came out of this lovely movie. I will once again reference, it's called, let's see if I've got it here, My Octopus Teacher. And it was just the whole movie was very charming, but the one point that really stuck hard with me was how in the ocean, nothing is trash. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So everything gets used and reused and reformed, and even old shells, they rumble around on the bottom of the ocean until they turn back into sand, and then the sand is useful. And I mean, it just never ends. The sand turns into stone, and then the stone grows corals, and it just never ends. It never ends. So part of the story for us to realign ourselves as a big human collective with the well-being of Mother Earth is to pull out of that psychology that anything is useless or disposable or lacking in some way, and that with sufficient creativity and intelligence, we can find ways to bring everything back into the fold of its expression of totality. And with that, I think it's a very nice time to read this question that came in since last night, because this question kind of summarizes yesterday's session, but it also adds to it. The lady who asked this question, I addressed two of her questions yesterday as well, but what a brilliant mind and a lovely writer and thoughtful, deep thinking person. So she kind of summed up what she thought were the basics of yesterday's session, and then was wondering how they could all fit together. And so she's offering all of us a little story. And this is a true story, or at least it's a true legend, a true story legend, a true story, it says here, that in 1840, so evidently it was recorded, 1840 in Tariganda, India, a newly widowed young woman, Venkanamba, refused to shave her head, as was the custom in her village for women in mourning. After she had her long, beautiful hair forcibly shaved off, she, in full view of half the village, immersed herself in the river and moments later reemerged with her hair with her full head of hair. Of course, this was considered a miracle. And so she asked, where do miracles come from? And Maharishi said that they came from ignorance. When we know, in other words, that when we know the mechanics involved, miracles are no longer miracles, right? Which is what energy healing is all about, right? That's what we're doing, is we're diving into the underlying mechanics of how consciousness forms into this manifest field, so that once you understand that, to be able to perform a miracle like Venkanamba performed, is like nothing. You can even say Venkanamba. Ooh, that's a miracle. Okay, so creation is said to blink on and off at infinite speed in and out of the gap. And that ties into something I was thinking about last night, so I shall return to that. This makes the world seem to sparkle to those with refined perception, yes? And those of you who aren't sure if you have refined perception, you can notice in the early morning as you're waking up, or in the night as you're falling asleep in the dark with the eyes closed, how there's a kind of a scintillating light that appears inside. You might notice the scintillating light inside with the eyes closed. That's that sparkling scintillation. The reason it blinks on again is, as it was before, is because of memory. So change the intention or memory going into the gap to change what is next expressed. Beautiful. Then she offers this beautiful suggestion. I love this suggestion. So if we collectively, innocently, and with all love and gratitude, follow the trail of the manifestation back to the source, home to Mother, holding the intention of the adorable perfection of our world. And that was part of the healing from yesterday, was we realized that a combination of creativity and the awareness of how adorable every single aspect of creation is. This combination would be valuable to, this combination would provide the foundation to find the resources to make everything useful again. So that idea of adorable perfection to our world. But without, this is such an interesting point, without the notion of healing or restoring or fixing the world. Because she says, since that kind of keeps the problem in the memory, right? So if we're diving into the gap with the idea of like, I'm going to fix this, then that kind of holds the memory going into the gap. But if we just go in with that very innocent sense of this is adorable perfection, and its adorable perfection is the main principle that I shall emerge from the gap, that will emerge from the gap, then if we could hold that radical reversal of perspective, then the Earth's original glorious design, pure water, clean air, healthy forests, balanced ecology, might also reemerge like Venkamamba's full head of hair. So, and it's very sweet. She puts footnotes at the bottom because she made notes from different places where information, absolutely beautiful. So thank you for that incredible story and suggestion. And I like it so much. And since we're right at the beginning of our webinar, I think this is like a really nice place to start for our webinar. We'll just take another moment. Let's take another moment and collectively dive into the silence of being, and just with that awareness of the adorableness and worthiness, the worthiness of every particle of creation, every particle of creation. I feel it going to the ancestors. Our silence is unbounded and it connects everything. So our awareness of the preciousness of every particle of creation communicates through the web of life to everything. Ancestors, all the people of the earth, all the organizing intelligences, which are weaving the fabric of experience and weaving our future. They're able to weave, this causal level of our physiology is able to weave adorableness into the storyline. And I see for so many of us in this healing session that bumps up against self, opinions of self. It's a big healing for the way we know and treat ourselves. And as we have in the past. And it folds back to the source of creation, recognized as adorable. All the way back to that para-Brahman, non-existent, existent and non-existent, adorable. And the reply from the source of creation is a light medicine. It's a flow of creative intelligence. It's a flow of knowingness, specified. It activates all the intelligence of the body that expresses adorableness. It's a very big healing for our attitudes and opinions about our sexuality, for example, or our elimination, or all the products, all the byproducts, the products and byproducts of the body. all the ways the body changes through time. It's all being gathered up in the basket of adorableness. And held in the loving home, that loving sacred home of self. Okay. Okay. We could go this type of healing, we could go on and on and on. But I just have to take another second of deepest gratitude to all of you for following with me through that little prayer, healing prayer. So grateful, so grateful. And it went out to the whole world. It went out to the whole world, both through space and time, which was really important. And it helped wash away, especially, I would say, the beliefs and self-attitudes that separate individuals from their own knowledge of their own deepest connection to the source of creation. It's very sweet. It's very sweet. Thank you. Lovely, delicious. Okay, I see lots of questions coming in on the question and answer box as well. So let's continue on. Oh, yes. Oh, okay. So look, another question just came in about animals. And so I think it would be good to go to that question, because that was a really another beautifully written question. Like, I wish I could just read the whole thing out to you, because it was just so beautifully written. But I think the main point, and I will read a little bit of this question word for word, but her main point was that she feels that all the animals are as much expressions of divinity as humans are. Sometimes we get kind of caught up in our own greatness as humans or whatever, but they all are. But the animals tend to be more specialized, and I would agree completely that they've come to this world, for specific reasons, and particularly the animals that we hold as pets tend to be here as liaisons between the human belief systems and reality and nature. They help us stay connected to nature. And she also asked about soma, and there was a point from that last question too that tied in. At some point of this webinar, I want to share with you some of my thoughts from through the night, because I was very rumbling on a lot of topics that were just like slightly beyond my reach. And so I was hoping to bring them to you guys and that we could look at them together, because sometimes when something's just slightly beyond my reach, when we look at them together with all of our lumens, then we find deeper truths, right? So we'll see about, we shall do that in just a moment, but let me continue with this question and this other. So her point is that humans are amazing, but so in completely different ways are plants, birds, animals, rocks, and crystals. I completely agree. We are unique, but so are all these other forms of being in their own way. I think we've lost sight of this in our absorption, in our magnificence. We try to measure everything by our own standards, right? And when these other forms of the source have their own measures, which are different to ours, right, but no less valuable. Yes, I would say that their measures are all like really close, intimate expressions of nature's measure. Like, they help us stay closer to nature's measure. Definitely no less valuable, maybe in some ways more valuable. I think it's only today that we're equipped to begin to see this. She also has this question about cats. I don't know what it is cats do when they purr, but they generate a field of soma, kind of like soma, primarily for themselves. Yes, but it's also a form of communication with or nurturing of those they love. an offering of sorts. Yes, I agree. I had a tamed feral cat who purrs when I look at him. So sweet. Yeah, cats are really interesting, aren't they? The purring sets up a field that's both off on the feeling level, because it's an expression of their hearts at that moment. Like their hearts tell them to purr, but it's also an auditory field, because that purring sound, it goes out into the environment and it has this kind of soft sort of shaking and sort of soothing the environment. It's absolutely beautiful. And also cats are just so beautiful animals. At one point I had read somewhere, although non-verifiable, that cats are kind of Venusian, that they're sort of like, they have a lot of Venus energy in them, but they do seem like that to me. They've got a lot of that just very beautiful, their beautiful faces and their beautiful movements, and the way they just languish around, creating just a lot of oxytocin. It's like a mom with a baby. Babies produce a lot of really yummy hormones that are very healing for a mother's body after going through the birthing process. So babies are kind of like medicine for the mother. And the cats kind of do that too a little bit. They're just so full of this soft, yummy qualities that they self-produce, that we get to enjoy that. And I'll read this other question about animals as well, and then maybe we can tie it all together with the thoughts I was having last night. Okay, yesterday did you say that animals don't have free will? What about the shark that came over and sat on the woman's lap, right? And did the shark just respond to the energy and feeling of the woman? So such a good question. So I did some deep thinking about this last night, because I actually am certain that animals have some free will. I'm sure they do. And if I said that last night, that animals don't have any free will, that was a mistake. Because after thinking about it, there are a couple things that came to mind. If soma is produced by the unique type of nervous system that humans have, coupled with the direct experience of the source of creation. So when we're experiencing the source of creation, we're creating soma. But since animals, they don't have quite the level of mental faculty to practice mental techniques. For instance, they don't even have language, etc. This lady was saying she thinks maybe they do transcend. And I was really thinking about that, the thing is that the devas are nourished by soma. And the devas are everywhere in the universe. They're not just in human bodies. They're in every kind of body. Any body that lives and grows and metabolizes food and beats their hearts, and their hearts beat. And so all these bodies have devas in them. Every heart has a deva. Every liver has a deva. Every brain has a deva. All the beautiful stones, all these crystals, the crystals are full of devas. They're all full of devas. So we can't say that the only source of soma in the universe is the human physiology when it's transcending, because this is a big universe. And there's a lot of devic energy in this universe, all in and around in every particle of creation, in every water molecule in the air, right? And every hydrogen atom, there's a deva. So that's a lot of soma to produce. That's a lot of soma. And the other thing is, so I was looking and I had this experience of finding myself like at the source of soma, a great, vast, eternal reservoir of soma that exists in the universe, like universal level of soma, universal level, and that it's produced in the universe as well. And I'm sorry, you guys, I don't have many more details on it than that. Possibly with our healing webinar today, we can discover more, or possibly over the course of the next weeks, now that it's been revealed that this resource exists, hopefully more detailed information will come forward. But I just wanted to offer that to you, because that was, thanks to all of you, that was an outgrowth, an outcropping both of this question and also just of being with you over the last few hours, I was thinking about that. So it's got to be that it's produced, and it's got to be that it's produced in the gap, right? It's produced as we go in and as we come out. Oh, and the other lady did, that was the other question I was looking at. Oh, hello, there it is. This bit of this question that I hadn't read, but I probably should. Nothing and no one that ever was is truly lost. Every expression in creation that was, is, or will be exists in the unmanifest ocean of being source, which is the primal home of the infinite creativity of natural laws that operate in the manifestation. These also exist together at all times, converging, one, at the scintillating point of intelligence in every grain of creation. So where's the soma? Every grain, which is said to be Mother Divine herself. And two, she's also called the ocean of memory, or Anonya Bhav, Anonya Abhava. And Anonya Abhava is one of the four phases of the gap. It's one of the four aspects of diving into and coming out of the gap. And the memory is that, let's see, Anonya Abhava, I'm pretty sure I could open a chart just to be sure, but I'm pretty sure that's the one just as it's going into the gap, collapsing into the gap. And the soma is the byproduct of that moving into and out of the gap. So it comes out at the first emergence, back out of the gap. It's kind of like the digestive process, right? It breaks down and then it builds back up. And so the soma comes out there. Now the question is, that doesn't have a huge amount to do with directly with nature, and I want to stay on target here, but I did want to mention that because I think it's a really important, it's actually a really important piece of information that's part of a larger thread that carries us from many of our past webinars into this webinar and will carry us into future webinars, I'm sure of it. So I did want to honor that experience and that idea coming up and share it with all of you, because as it bounces off of you in your magnificence, it shines forward with greater detail and amazingness. So I'm grateful. Here's another question. Is the worthiness and adorableness in every particle of creation, does that include cancer, right? Does that include nasty stuff? Oh, and there was another question that came up like that yesterday. It's hard for me to accept that. I have to twist myself into a pretzel shape to try to accept that. Also for me, chemo was used to destroy and dispose of the cancer, right? So this ties into a part of yesterday's session that I didn't really cover a lot today, but I think it's time, because that was the other part of my vision last night, was that I saw how we talked about how the wholeness of creation has a sort of intention. There's sort of a cosmic intention behind the evolutionary trajectory of being. Being itself, the source of creation, is also evolving, and it's evolving in it through its relationship with its own manifest field with all of us. It's like through the dynamics of the relationship between the unmanifest and the manifest field, there's this sort of flow that happens, and that flow gives rise to universal evolution. So that we as individuals, sometimes we can digress, like the flow is going like this, and we can sort of digress off like that. And anytime we digress off, we will inevitably be pulled back in. And depending on how much momentum is behind the digression away from the cosmic evolution, that will determine how uncomfortable it is to come back into the fold. And then I saw the whole creation from starting with the Big Bang, and that its evolution being multidimensional and like a big scintillating ball of wholeness, expanding and expanding and expanding like that. And that what the human experience does is it looks like little petals that fold, that come off, and then they have to fold back, you know, like a petal. If you follow the shape of the petal, it comes out and then it comes back. The edge of the petal comes out. Always, it's always anchored in, right, to the center of the flower. And so the whole field of human expression are like these little petals that are coming off of this great, huge force of nature's evolutionary expression. Those divergences, those points where we move a little bit away from the center of the intention of the creator. And then we have to be pulled back in, sometimes through uncomfortable experiences. They also have this effect of stretching the evolutionary cycle into ever larger fields of expression. And as I've mentioned in previous webinars, the evolution of totality is so important that human comfort becomes a secondary consideration. So we stretch ourselves out away from that core of the evolutionary trajectory, only to have to be brought back in again. Oh, there was another question about this that came up, but I shall return to it. Only to be brought back in again. But each time we do that, it's like that evolutionary core, it also stretches out a little bit with us. It stretches out with us a little bit. That's why the principle of a pinch for a pint works, right? Because there can be, when the stress is accrued, it can come in layers and layers over the course of time. And so it could be gallons and gallons of stress coming into the system, so to say, technically speaking, or metaphorically speaking there. But when the stress leaves, it's a shorter path. It's a shorter path to get back in, right? Because as we've left the trajectory of nature's expression, nature's had to bend with us a little bit. So when we come back, it's a shorter path back in. The other question that came up about that was, we were talking about, and maybe this will also shine light on your question about the cancer, because we'll approach it from different angles, right? And then it makes more and more sense from each angle. You began yesterday's session, I began with water, and she feels the elemental is very much crucial to understanding nature. The fire, water, earth, air move together, and both within us and within nature around us, and also space, of course. Perhaps the elemental is a clue to grounding this discussion. Oh no, that wasn't the question I was looking for. Oh yeah, here it was. It was this one up here. So if water has memory, it is alive. It has consciousness. Yeah, it is sentient. It is a sentient being. It connects moon, the earth, our bodies, other planets. Absolutely, it's in the air, right? Our experiences of live animal, mineral, plant, etc. What if water is a sentient being traveling over eons toward the great central sun via the planets, hopping towards that? Yeah, it's a beautiful concept, right? And I definitely feel that both the water and the air is also a kind of sentient being, because I found in my work with nature that the air is so responsive to our feelings. And air is associated with skin and feeling, right? Because that's how we feel, is with our skin. So yeah, water and air both very responsive, and air more in the memory part of it, and air more with the feeling part of it. So that's something to pull to. There's a thread to pull back in again. But what about our attitude towards water? Emoto's experiment response noted that the worst one was with the label ignored. I think that's what your question, I wasn't quite sure how you worded this, but I think here's what her exact word. Emoto's experiment response noted was the worst towards the ignored. So he put the labels on the water containers and then froze them and looked at the water crystal patterns. And I think what that means is that the ignored label was the one that came up with the least coherent crystals. Then she says, what about our toilets? Oh, what about our toilets? Like, what about the cancer? What about the toilets? And the thought there is that is partly due to our definition of what's useful and what's not useful, right? Because as I mentioned before, as we were looking in that deep healing that we did as a collective, all the products and all the byproducts of the physiology have a sort of natural value. And the water receives a lot of minerals and a lot of nutrients and a lot of bacteria life experience. It gets life from what we put in it, that are from our feces and urine. It gets this lovely, rich influx of materials that under normal circumstances would be recycled back into the earth and would act as basically fertilizer and nutrition for other aspects of our world. So, but I think her attitude, she's talking here about the attitude toward those waste products and the attitude towards the water, like we're using the water to carry away what we don't want to deal with. And it's true, but it's also the way our bodies have been constructed to create these natural offerings to the creation. So I do feel that the healing work that we did yesterday, and maybe that's why the question came up, was to support the ability for the collective to embrace the idea that everything has its place and value. The thing about falling ill, whether it's through cancer or some other means, is that it causes a shift in trajectory. So that means that the life trajectory was going in a certain direction. And when you realize that you're sick, you have to change. And it pulls the trajectory back in again. So the cancer has this job of forcing a type of change that involves increased self-nurturing, self-care, self-protection, sensitivity to the self. All these things have to increase. And those are very much expressions of that adoration. More questions coming in here. Lots of great questions coming in here. Is it soma connected with joy of beauty of nature, animals, children, friends? I think we could say yes. This is a question from Croatia. Is it that soma is connected with the joy of beauty, nature, animals, children, friends? And I would say that the experience of joy in its essential nature is the human response to, and the Davic response. It's the response all the way down through the entire field of consciousness, all the way to the causal level of our physiologies. It is the response to soma. It's just such a precious, lovely, luscious, wonderful, wonderful material. There is also fire in water. A scientific experiment. Ooh, that's really interesting and really amazing. Yeah, and I think we could think of that in our physiologies in terms of the ventricle fluid that flows through our body and the carrying of hormones and such like that. I hope I answered all of your questions sufficiently. Oh, okay. This is the other question I was looking for that ties into the one about cancer. Can the discomfort of realignment be shifted from stimulation to, which is torturous, to a feeling of like, I don't want to realign, to being tickled? Is the diversion by the individual fuel for the dynamic expansion of cosmic expression? And yes, I think I've already answered that one. And yes, the answer is, by recognizing those cues from the environment that it's time to turn around and come back into the fold of totality and back into the fold of the thrust or the trajectory of cosmic evolution, what we do is we catch problems before they become so acute. So we catch them before there's a lot of suffering involved. And the second thing is that by recognizing when the nature's tapping on the shoulder and saying, you need to go back now, you pulled away enough and the divine has gotten enough stretch out of this, it wants you back in, that if rather that, and that was part of yesterday's healing, that rather than looking at that as a sort of terrible experience and a sort of threatening or unpleasant, we realize, oh, this is that moment where I have to let go of all those intentions and all that momentum that I had behind that thrust away, and just enjoy the coming home process. Enjoy coming home. Enjoy, enjoy. Let's look at some more questions. Oh, thank you. That was a beautiful question. Thank you. Okay, so we did that one. Okay, please, can our wondrous healing collective turn its attention to the bees? They seem to be affected by pesticides, 5G rapidly dwindling in numbers. Also, I think their environments, destroyed environments. Please, can we do a healing to strengthen their resilience and help their populations around the globe thrive? And this may seem like a silly question. No, it's not a silly question. It's a very good question, which you may not feel is webinar worthy, but it is webinar worthy. But I appreciate the thoughts. And so on this note, I would like to turn my attention to not only the bees, but it turns out the bees are in good company, because the other insects are dying too at an alarming rate. And so I had some statistics that I wanted to share with you. 1/3 of all insects are endangered. And right now, the weight of all insect bodies on Earth is 17 times the weight of all humans on Earth. And 1/3 of them are endangered. So their mass is falling off at a rate of about 2.5% a year. This means that in 100 years, there literally won't be any more insects. If they keep diminishing at the rate that they are currently diminishing, we won't have any. In 50 years, they'll be down to half. In 100 years, they'll be down to none. So, I mean, you can imagine the impact, because insects are super important, right? They're pollinators and they're eaten by all sorts of animals. We'll lose all of the animals that feed off of them, like birds, like we like birds. Maybe so not everybody likes insects, but everybody likes birds. I mean, we should like them all. We need to like them all. They need to see their adorableness. Climate change, loss of habitat, pesticides causing it. And that's been mostly over, the mass has been falling at a rate of 2.5% over the last 25 to 30 years. So just in most of our lifetimes. Puerto Rico has lost 98%, 98% of their insects in just 35 years. That's just really scary. In England, the butterfly population fell 58% between 2000 and 2009. In the US, honeybees have dropped from 6 million to 3.5 million. And the die-off of insects seems to have started around 1900, according to my notes. Oof, and it says here that one study in Germany showed that there was a 75% loss of insects, not just in areas that are like highly cultivated, but even in nature preserves nearby areas that were where the, you know, all the plants and their habitats had been cut down. It says 80% of the biomass of insects disappeared in the last 25 to 30 years. Out of 5.5 million species, only a fifth of them have even been identified and named. So those are some pretty staggering, kind of scary statistics, but I think it points to the importance of the work we're about to embark on now, which is what can we do as a great, beautiful, big, powerful healing collective to support the insects, bees, of course, but other animals as well. Also, the same man who sent the bee question also sent me a lovely video by a lady named Valerie Solheim, who started out doing deep research into what can be done to heal bees. And she found out some lovely details, like really useful information about bees. And one of them was that bees thrive when they build their hives over areas of Earth that have more electromagnetic oomph, like ley lines, like over ley lines and nodes in the Earth. So she's, restoring bee hives in places on Earth, and sacred, kind of like you could say sacred places on Earth. She also found that the way they buzz, that they function as a collective, and I think the insects do too. A lot of insects do as well, that a bee who's out on its own for 24 hours is a dead bee. That bees have to be with the rest of their hive. They have to be with their collective. That in a sense, they're kind of a collective body. Kind of like the birds when they swirl around together, there's a sense of that they're a wholeness. She had some other lovely points on her video about like ancient traditions and myths and legends about bees and how they've come to Earth to help us. And so she records the buzzing of the bees, and she sells CDs of bees buzzing at different times of year because they sound different at different times of year, and how the different types of sound production that they create. It's a beautiful actual visual too of how the vibration appears when you make it into like a diagram. Absolutely beautiful, orderly, gorgeous, looks like that sort of scintillating expansion of natural law. Anyway, it's a very beautiful gift to our Earth. The insects provide a very beautiful gift. So we're just going to spend a moment as our collective and dive into the collective consciousness of the insects of our Earth. I'm going to speak to you could call it like the king of the devas of each insect has its own little energies, but there's a collective form there. And the first thing that I'm noticing is that the collective form of the insects of the Earth is in a contracted state. It's like, it's kind of in its healing mode. It's not 100%, not 100% transcending, but it's definitely in its I see the delicacy in it. I can see the delicacy in it. And our group healing collective is just reaching out gently to the soul of all insects, to recognize it, the opposite of ignored, to recognize it with loving appreciation and recognizing its adorableness, recognizing that aspect or quality of nature's intelligence, of the source of creation, which is present in all things, all living things, from rocks to water to everything. That quality of adorableness is a sort of universal expression. And I know it's not in our culture, it's not traditional. We look at their bodies with their kind of long, lanky legs and things, and they don't seem that adorable, cockroaches, ooh. But but within them all, for example, about 2 weeks ago, I noticed a mosquito here in my area, in my work area. I don't know if I see it now. No, I don't see it now. But I noticed this mosquito. And I thought, oh, it's a mosquito, I'm going to kill it. But, it was kind of out of my reach, and I was too tired. It was at night. I didn't want to kill it. And I noticed how it came and it flew near me, but then it just flew off, and it didn't try to bite me. It didn't try to land. It didn't try to bite. And I've noticed this mosquito just near me. It comes near me, but it never tries to sting me for like 2 weeks now. And last night at the end of the webinar, I just turned this off, and something out of the corner of my eye, and I went like that, and I was, oh, it's that mosquito. It's that mosquito. It had come right up so close to me, and I just was like a little dark something, and I kind of swished with my hand, and I bumped it, and it flew off like that. And I thought, I've had a feeling that since these 2 weeks that this mosquito is just hanging with us. It's just hanging with me. It's not here to sting me. It's just here to be. It's just here to be. And I mean, mosquitoes are one of those things that for years, you see a mosquito, you just kill it. It's just like, clockwork. You see it, you kill it. But it's been my pet. It's been my pet for a while. And, it's true that their bodies aren't so, like, they're not soft like mammal bodies or whatever, but they have their adorableness. They have their willingness to adapt. They are very adaptable, to adapt to this world in a way that supports a higher expression of or a higher level of experience for all of us. We don't know what kinds of stinging things there were back in the times of the dinosaurs, but all the life forms on Earth seem to have been becoming sort of smaller and gentler and sweeter. I feel our hearts stretching into places where the habitat still exists and reaching into those places and pouring our loving recognition into those spots. And those habitat places also have more biodiversity, so more different types of plants, minerals, mineral-rich soils. And what's happening is we're creating a light medicine, our collective, that nurtures and nourishes the deeper levels of the environment around the insects. So it's like creating a soft bed, like creating a sort of cushion of softness through the web of life, right? The intention flows through the threads of consciousness to those areas where the microbiome or the biome exists for the insects. And the softness, anywhere our attention flows, so the soma flows. So the devas are carried through to those areas to promote the changes that the insects need to make in order to adapt, because they have to adapt to pesticides. Oh, there was in one of the articles, there was something about how bees on the East Coast of America had adapted to certain pesticides, and their numbers were actually increasing in that part of America. Isn't that interesting? So the insects, their little lives are kind of short compared to ours, and adapting is one of the things they can do to be able to make a comeback. And adapting in a way, as we're pouring this adoration and recognition of them as absolutely beautiful and sweet and adorable, the net result is that they're changed, just like the lady who'd written the question, like if you dive into the gap with a certain awareness, certain sense in your awareness, then that creates the memory pattern that produces a different outcome. So that's what we're doing in today's session. That's what we have been doing for the last few minutes. I see so many more questions. Oh, it's exciting, lots of questions. Let's see, feeling ignored is almost antithetical to feeling precious and adorable. Right. Yes, you saw that. I saw that too, yes. Beautiful. Thank you. I love it. We're so close in our thinking. Really, when we meet together like this and we do this really deep abstract work, we really align our thinking, and it helps. Believe me, your perspectives and your visions help me a lot. So she says, so does it establish a principle of further unfolding inside the elements we know? Does each one contain all elements of self and others? That looks like the continuation of another question. Let's go up and see. Oh, okay, so I see. Two people sent in a question at the same moment. So one lady was like halfway through her question, and then another question came in. So there's also fire in water, It's a scientific experiment. So does it establish a principle of further unfolding inside the elements that we know of? Oh, that the elements unfold within each other. What appears to me to be happening is that the dynamic interaction between the elements becomes more and more refined. It becomes more and more delicate. So from a scientific perspective, and they measure that you can find fiery elements within water, but that's measuring at, if it's verifiable and it's been measured through like objective observation of sorts, then it means it's probably been looked at more of a superficial level. And as it gets to finer levels, those relationships, they refine down, they sort of rarefy. I think that's what happens. Does each one contain all elements of self and others? That's a very good question, because my experience is that senses of perception are also associated with the elements. And we know that there are places in our sensory experience where there is kind of an overlap. And one of the things we talked about yesterday was the senses of perception that are contained within organs that don't have organs of perception, like the perception of the heart and the perception of the thymus. And last night I was looking into the perception of the liver, also very important, and also very much in this kind of upper chest area. Yeah, that there are ways of perceiving that seem to not necessarily conform to the divisions that we experience at the surface with our regular senses of perception. And those are, in most cases, sort of connected to feeling. They seem to be connected to feeling, but they also have some of the other senses as well. So does each one contain all elements of self and others? I would say that when we follow the elements back to the source of creation, then at that point, everything's contained as a wholeness. But that when the division process starts to come up, and here we get into, it's a very good question, and we get into the very, very finest, very first dynamics of how the unmanifest consciousness appears as multiples. And the first division is actually a threefold division of knower, known, and process of knowing, essentially. That's one way of describing it, the threefold, and that the three combine in different ways to create five. And so the five is like a next layer of expression out of three. Well, actually, first there's two, right? Because there's being, fullness, nature, and then the dynamic potential of the infinite silence, dynamic potential. But then a relationship is between them. And so that makes three, the relationship between them. And then the three combine in various ways to make five. And here we get into some physics, and there's some lovely information that I have about physics that I would like to share with you at some point. I think I was going to do a webinar on physics and energy healing. So that's another thing, but that's another topic. But the answer is ultimately yes. In the field of wholeness and totality, they all are found within each other. Ultimately, the simple answer, the short answer. And I have to the short answer because there's a lot of questions coming in. This is another short question here on the papers. He says, when he sees a snail struggling its way across a man-made structure, like a road or something, slowly heading toward the greenery, its natural intended environment, he feels tremendous guilt that we have paved paradise. And put up a parking lot. So he always gently picks them up and nestles them back at the base of a nearby tree or a nearby grassy area. Am I being compassionate and helpful by doing this, or am I hindering their karma and growth, and therefore potentially unwittingly creating karma for myself? Based on all that we've done in this webinar, I would say there's nothing wrong with picking up a little snail and carrying it over to the base of a tree. And I don't think this is creating bad karma for you. It's essentially communicating a message to that particular snail and to all snails that there are a few good humans, there are a few good eggs out there yet, a few good humans out there yet is one thing. And the other thing is that type of act of caring for them is also part of their karma. That's also the snail's karma, that it was to be picked up by someone and put by the tree, right? And compared to the snail who didn't have that good karma. And it's very much an expression of your ability to recognize and appreciate that adorableness that's present in all beings. So by doing that, you're giving expression to that quality of adorableness. And anytime that we're doing that, you're recognizing the adorableness of the snail. You're being adorable when you're doing it. I'm sorry, you are. And so, yeah, it's beautiful. It's very sweet. Thank you. Thank you for doing that from time to time. I think we would all do what we can for the animals if we could, just on a gross level. But also I think the energy healing that we're doing together here on a subtler level is also really powerful and really important. A question comes up about the cycles and rhythms of nature and the issue of daylight savings time. And I have to say that's like a special area of concern for me too. My physiology has trouble with daylight savings time every time. And it's different in Europe than the US. And we forgot to remind the Europeans. I think it's more important that we do it in the springtime, that the US time change is different from the European time change. So yeah, I think in the spring, if we don't tell you, you could miss a webinar, because the Europeans are much more sensible about the way they orchestrate their time changes. And, I mean, ideally the time change would go with the equinoxes, right? Because that's nature's time change, but not in the US. We have to wait all the way until November, or actually, I think tomorrow night, the 31st of October. We don't change till then. Like my body was changed already like weeks ago I was ready. So the time change, what we're doing here is we're interfacing with governmental policies, basically. And I've talked to a few people about that, and they say that, well, the government policies are the way they are in order to accommodate the farmers. Not going to lie, the loss of insect habitat is tremendously the byproduct of the farming industry, particularly the large farming industry, because they take their fields and they stretch them all the way out to the edge to the next guy's field. And it used to be, in the old days, there'd be like a little area of like bushes and trees, like just a little, at least a strip, between one farm and the next farm. And over time, those have gone away. And so now they're like hundreds of miles of farmland in the US where they don't even have the little strips anymore. And the strips were where the animals and the insects lived. And then when you add the pesticides and herbicides on top of that, it makes a very unfriendly environment for insects. And then on top of it, supposedly for the farmers. But the thing is, the farmers are also adorable, and we have to, bless the farmers for raising food. Oh, another thing that I read, and I didn't have it in my notes, but I found out, was that organic farms tend to have a lot more insects on them than non-organic farms. So small family organic farms or just even large organic farms will still be a safe haven for insects. Nice and interesting. Go organic. The time change, we're looking at governmental policies. We're looking at having to shift the entire thinking of the human collective, because the representatives in government are a reflection of the collective consciousness of the people. So we have a very good way to gauge how high the collective consciousness of our country or our state or our city is, based on the type of people and personalities that end up in the governmental positions. We can gauge. And it's a wonderful way to keep our finger on the pulse of how evolved the collective consciousness is. But from my perspective, the solution to passing laws that bring the time cycles, the human time change, daylight savings time cycles back into a healthier, more gentle pattern, a pattern that's more gentle on our bodies, is a matter of raising all the collective consciousness on Earth, and thereby raising the consciousness of those individuals who represent us in government, and then they will pass kinder laws. And that's big. That's very big and very broad. It's a very big, broad sweep. So I think what we're going to do with that one is I think we're going to save that one for a little bit later down the road. Maybe we could do an energy healing for politics. Oh, well, we're kind of going to do that next time around. Just a little teaser there. No spoilers, but we will be doing, the next one is going to be for systems. And that includes systems like circulatory and digestive and so, but it also includes large systems like governmental systems. So that should be interesting. I'm seeing we're running out of time and so many questions. So we shall go, we're going to skim past that question and save it for later. Or comment, since everything is consciousness, so-called inanimate objects also have feeling. Yes, as William Wordsworth says, 'tis my faith that every flower enjoys the air it breathes. Oh. Question, could we please do healing for humans' effect on the planet or on humans' attitude toward the planet as living organism? Yes, yes, even the inanimate. And I mean, that's basically, I say, was the core of yesterday's healing as well, to be able to see the adorableness in every particle of creation. I'm just looking to see if the healing that we already did on that can be enhanced or extended or expanded at this time. Yes. So the healing that we did, that was that ability to recognize adorableness of divinity in all things created, that is able to be received as a download into the heart center, big heart wisdom center of the physiology. And I'm looking to see, can it be received by everybody on Earth? Looks like not everyone, but there are enough individuals who have enough emotional maturity, and even those who are on the fence, even those who are not quite up to that level of emotional maturity, all of them can receive this download of this particular healing directly into their heart energy center, into their heart wisdom center. And that's like creating a kind of, it's helping to anchor the healing that we did yesterday to recognize the adorableness in all things. It's anchoring it into this wisdom center, and that includes like the form of the nervous system in this part of the body. So stabilizing it at a physiological level, and also as it does that, it stabilizes, it integrates, it creates a platform for the awakening to a whole family of new layers of belief and understanding and perception about the world. Oh, so it creates a platform for a refinement, a whole new phase of refinement of perception that allows individuals like me looking at the mosquito. Like, I'm at my age, I spent my whole life just, you see a mosquito, you just kill it. You don't even think of it as a living thing, right? And like, I've had to really rethink my relationship with mosquitoes since this guy came to live at my house, and is such a good, such a good housemate, well behaved, just wants to hang. So sweet. I felt bad that I kind of bonked him yesterday. I think it took him by surprise. He kind of skittered off like, Anyway. Beautiful, beautiful. Going to the heart. It's going to the heart. It's going through our hearts and then out to the collective consciousness. Thank you from my deep heart. It's time to turn around, and I have to go. I have to let go and just enjoy the coming home process. Brings tears of gratitude. Oh, thank you. Also, I did do an experience and stop message of cancer, even from the beginning, October 2019, and knew even then that this cancer message is basically benevolent. Your information on the change of trajectory fills my understanding. I will meditate on this. Thank you. Oh, that's such a sweet thing. Yeah, I hope it helps everybody. May it help everybody. Could you send us the link to the bee video? Oh, absolutely. I'll send it. Yes. Most bees and pollinating invertebrates are solitary. Honeybees are hive dwellers. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Oh, so not saying anybody's names, but yes. So her perception is that not that many insects are group, but ants are probably collective as well, right? Insects in fetal position for self-preservation. Probably. Native bees and wasps are solitary and short-lived. They are at great risk, as you said, and each continent has its native populations. Refer to Doug Tallamy. And could we put that name, Doug Tallamy, in the links that we send out so anybody who wants to follow up on that reference can? If you have insights, we're cruising through all these questions fast. We're just a little bit over time, but I'm just making sure I haven't lost anybody here. If you have any insights about what is adorable about silverfish, please let me know. Yeah, they're kind of slithery, aren't they? I actually have a thought about that, and it really ties into a very kind of deep experience that I was saying, like, over the last 24 hours, which is going to be, that experience is going to be, we're going to return to it in future webinars, just saying that. But the thing about their bodies made of those little links, and that they're kind of a long, thin form. Their bodies themselves are a really beautiful expression of the way some of the threads in the astral field appear. So they're very close to being nice expressions of the astral field. But sorry, I'm not giving you more of an answer with that one, but I want to make sure I haven't. Oh, you know what? The same thing about killing. She's saying maybe I'm creating bad karma myself by killing silverfish. Actually, the same thing about killing them as, picking them up and putting them in a safe haven, that they also have karma. And we become the instruments of their karma. So I remember at one point I was working in a food production area that didn't have good screens and no air conditioning in the middle of the summer, ovens as big as a room, just blaring at 400 degrees. And let me tell you, I had one of my workers there. I was the head of this area. His only job was to kill flies. That was it all day. Any fly comes in, he kills a fly. That was it. And that guy was busy from like the beginning of the day to the end of the day. God bless him. But I figured that he's a very, very evolved soul, very high soul. And I figured it was the karma of those flies to be killed by such a man, such a being, such a great soul. Can you please include your email statistics about the insects? Yes, I'd be happy to write up a little page with these statistics. Maybe can you make a note about that, dear? Maybe I'm creating, oh yeah, okay, it's tonight. Yeah, the time change, by the way, everybody, the time change is tonight, just letting everybody know. In the USA, it was already Europe a week ago. On March 26, 2019, the European Parliament voted in favor of removing daylight savings time permanently. Each member state has until April 2020 to decide whether to remain permanently on summertime or not, or to change their clocks back one final time to permanent standard time. Well, that's interesting. Also known as winter time. So hopefully if Europe does it, the USA will follow suit. Oh, that would be wonderful. God bless Europe. You guys are leading us on several accounts. I'm just so grateful. You've just had a lot of time to really mature. It's a lot more, I would say, maturity and mature attitudes too about the body and the nature of life. We have friends who produce honey with love. Now they don't take anything from the bees, so they have enough for themselves. Oh, that's so sweet. Well, you should send them this link about the lady who talks about bees, because she says that these CDs that she creates actually are really, really healing for the bees too. And she's helped a lot of bee colonies survive things like pests and other challenges that they were facing. by playing these healing CDs for them. All right, I think I covered pretty much all the questions. Thank you for bearing with me. No, there's one question about trees that I missed. Darn it. Okay, but see, that we're way over time, so I think I need to stop. But I'm going to hold on to this question about trees because it's beautiful. And I'm grateful that you asked it, again, from one of our dear, deep thinking participants in the webinars. And trees are so precious. I think we need to return to them. Okay, everybody, thank you for being with me today. Thank you for everything. It's been really lovely. And as I said, 3 weeks from now, we will dive into a healing for systems. I'm pretty sure, right? That one's
actually it's turning darkness to light.
Oh no, we're going even deeper than that. We're going into the one after it's for systems. The next one is turning darkness to light, where we dive into the darkest, most malevolent, most insidious energies on earth and see what we can do to bring light to the dark corners of the field of human experience and world experience. So, okay, get your armor on, come join me. Thank you, everybody. See you again soon. Thank you for all the love. Bye.